I'm Momo. Welcome to Storytime with Momo. Today we have a real special book. One of my vintage friends, best friends, has asked me to read this book today. And it's kind of a long book, but I promise it's one of the sweetest books that I've ever read. And I want to share it with you. So join with me now as we read a fun book written by Laurie Parker, who lives in Starkville, and she illustrated it too, and she wrote more books about Mississippi that you can check out. The name of this one is The Turtle Saver. And it says, "Thou canst stir a flower without troubling a star. You must travel throughout all of time and space to know the true impact of any event." And there are going to be some events in this story, so listen carefully. Happened one June on the quiet Natchez Trace, the start of a chain of events that took place. With one act of kindness, that's how it began, a good deed performed by a good-hearted man. He was driving along some years back on his way to a Little League tournament happening that day. His grandson was playing. The game was at 3. He was a proud granddad as could be. The ball game was what he was thinking about when he spotted an object he couldn't make out. He saw something dark in the road up ahead. "Reckon what that is," he silently said. Was it a shadow? Apart from a car? The man couldn't tell. It was from afar. But as he approached and came closer to it, he noticed it moved just the least little bit. And that's when he realized and cautiously slowed. A turtle! A turtle was crossing the road. It lumbered across with a slow turtle gait. The man in the truck knew it was probable fate. A car or an RV could squash its shell flat. It troubled the man to think about that. More cars would be coming along soon, he knew, and so there was only one thing he could do. He pulled his truck over and stopped right away and quickly hopped out, not a moment's delay. First looking both ways like a smart person does, he went to the place in the road where it was. He squatted beside it. "Hello there," he said, which the old turtle retracted its head. The man picked it up with compassion and care and walked to a field near and put it down there. He felt better knowing it wouldn't be struck, so when he went back and drove off in his truck. And that's just what happened. This good turtle saver had done a small creature a very big favor. And this simple act that was mighty kind-hearted is how several things that took place all got started. Get ready, because it's going to get started. The just rescued turtle sat still for a spell. Then finally his head poked back out of his shell. Not really aware what had happened at all, he blinked several times, then he started to crawl. He crawled through the grass where he had been gently put. He moved several inches at first, then a foot. He crawled through the green field, he ambled across and came to some trees draped with thick Spanish moss. He centered the woods, then he emerged from the trees, and he came to some weeds and he forged through these. He crawled and he crawled till he had gone about a mile. Needless to tell you, it took him a while. And after he had crawled for a week and then 2, he came to the reservoir, sparkling in blue. Its muddy bank beckoned, its cool water called. So with one great effort, up it he crawled. And that's where his crawling eventually stopped, when into the water the tired turtle plopped. The splash that had made when he did it was small. The waves of the created weren't big ones at all, but this little turtle splash was something enough to set things in motion, to start up some stuff. For on an old cypress knee, mere yards away, a big sleepy bullfrog sat sunning that day. When he heard the soft splash, the turtle kaplop. It started him somehow and caused him to hop. He leapt with great force from where he had been sitting, and while he was airborne, he barely missed hitting a great big old dragonfly aimless gliding. The two critters came very close to colliding. The quick dragonfly sharply turned in the air, avoiding the crash with the frog that was there. This bug changed direction. His dodge took him high, way up where no bothersome frogs would go by. There's the frog, and there's the dragonfly, and there's the turtle, swimming, getting cool. Now, what of this close call? What of this near miss? Is there some conclusion to draw about this? Was it only random, or does make a sense to say that part of the chain of events? Our turtle is saved and creates a small splash. A jarred frog and a big bug with wings almost crash. The dragonfly dodges and heads on up higher. Did just one good deed help make all this transpire? For if this one turtle had not been alive, if he had not been saved by the man on a drive, he couldn't have crawled to the lake for a drink. Would these things have happened? Now what do you think? Would that lazy bullfrog have budged from his spot? If there had been no turtle splash, probably not. Perhaps something else would have made that frog go, but we just can't say that because we really don't know. And what of the dragonfly? Now way up high. It might be important. Just wait to see why. The dragonfly liked it up high where he was. He darted and dashed with his wings all about, a buzz. He never had risen so far up before. There seemed to be more room to sail and to soar. 'Twas while he was up there that something occurred, another near crash, but this time with a bird. He had not seen it coming right toward him at all, for it was a hummingbird, and they're pretty small. They looked at each other, each holding his ground. The bird made the first move, a quick sudden bound. The bird chased the dragonfly. It was like tag. They zoomed through the air with a zig and a zag. The playful pursuit carried on for a bit until the small hummingbird grew tired and quit. The frolicsome hummingbird-dragonfly chase had taken them afar from the first meeting place. And now the small hummingbird realized it had flown to some other place that to him was unknown. He hovered and hummed and looked this way and that. Where was his feeder that he had once been all at? He saw something red near the ground way below, and that's where the wee bird decided to go. Below, far below, in the backyard somewhere, a woman was sitting outside in a chair. She sat by herself, sadly wiping a tear. Her husband had died. It had been a hard year. She was now a widow, and she missed him greatly. Just facing each day had been hard for her lately. She sat doing something that made her more sad. She looked through an album of photos she had. The album was big and its cover was red. Its full pages spoke of the life they had led. Their wedding, their children, vacations and more, birthdays and Christmases, and good times galore. Black and white photos, old portraits now yellow. Her husband had been such a wonderful fellow. She stared at a picture and his handsome grin. when something made goosebumps appear on her skin. The hummingbird came down and hovered nearby. The red of her album had captured his eye. Just inches away, right in front of her face, the tiny bird seemed to just float in one place. The widow sat still without saying a word, amazed to have such a close look at the bird. The bird was so delicate, tiny, and sweet. She marveled to watch him and see his wings beat. Her yard had no feeder for this little guy, and so he took off and flew back way up high. But she had been uplifted and cheered by his coming. The rest of the morning, she walked around humming. So felt that the bird was a sign from above, sent by her husband to show her his love. She wanted her small friend to visit her more. So later that same day, she went to the store. She purchased a feeder, a hummingbird kit. It worked too. They showed up to drink out of it. She placed it outside in a nice shady spot, and more than one came, in fact, a whole lot. She got quite attached to the visiting hummers. Like jewels with wings, how they brightened her summers. The joy that they brought her was great for words. So one year she started to feed other birds. She bought several feeders and all kinds of seeds. She put out old cornbread, it makes yummy feed. She got a nice bird bath and something called suet. Birds loved her yard now. They came flying to it. Robins and redbirds and jays bright and blue, and sparrows and finches and woodpeckers too. Her yard was a happy place year after year, with pretty birds singing and chirping their cheer. The smiles that they gave her were lovely to see. To think that one hummingbird had caused this to be. If he had not shown up in her yard on that day, he had chased that big dragonfly out of his way, and if that same dragonfly hadn't flown high because of the splash, startled frog going by, not for the one turtle saved by the man, would she have become such a bird-watching fan? And look at her yard full of birds and bird feeders and bird baths. About 3 blocks away from the bird-watching spot, on the edge of downtown, on a small corner lot, was an old service station closed down years by, with 2 rusty gas pumps that pump gas no more, and windows half broken and half caked with grime. It would have been likely a matter of time before someone bought it and leveled it flat. That happens quite often in places like that. But something prevented it. Something occurred. Something involving another small bird. A wren that flew over this old place one day had been at the widow's yard 3 blocks away, had eaten some seeds there, and he never knew a seed was still stuck to his tail when he flew. And as he flew over the edge of downtown, the seed came unstuck and came falling down. The little seed landed in quite a location, between 2 pumps at the old service station. This would have been much worth talking about, except that the seed wren dropped made a sprout. From the crack in the ground, it shot through a little green shoot, and then it grew and grew. And it was a wonder how weeks passed. The shoot made a green plant that kept growing fast. Between these 2 gas pumps, it looked like a weed, except it was taller, much taller indeed. It peaked out 6 feet, and then late in the spring, a big bud appeared at the top of this thing. And then something happened that made traffic stop. The gigantic sunflower opened on top. The flower was huge, yellow and bright. Between these old gas pumps, a curious sight. People in cars going by slow to stare, wondering, how did that flower get there? And look at it. And look, there's the little bird looking at it. It's pretty awesome, isn't it? A man from the newspaper even passed by. When it came to photos, he had a good eye. His camera was with him, so he stopped his van and took a nice photo, which his paper ran. It made the front page. It was deemed a rare shot. A sunflower there in an unlikely spot. This sunflower photograph cast such a spell that other state newspapers ran it as well. It ran in the Ledger, the Dispatch, and the Star, so lots of folks saw it, both near and far. A single sunflower had caused quite a stir, but don't forget all that helped make that occur. In one local city whose newspaper used it, a wealthy man saw it and quietly perused it. It wasn't the flower that had him engrossed. It was the old station that he studied the most. He thought with some work and some love and some paint, the building could be rather charming and quaint. He bought it and saved it from being torn down, and now there's a gallery there in that town. He filled it with all kinds of colorful art and gave that old gas station there a new start. The sunflower photo just seemed to have power, and the newspaper readers were cheered by the flower. One lady who noticed it thought of her sister and mused, since she moved off up north, I've sure missed her. I know she loves sunflowers. She would like it. I'll clip it and save it and send it to Sis. Her scissors were handy, so some quick snipping, she cut out the picture. Now it was a clipping. She put it on top of her good coupon pile, then left to go visit a neighbor a while. Now, it just so happened that while she was gone, her husband came back inside from mowing the lawn. He refilled his ice water glass at the sink and then went to the table and plopped down to drink. A whole lot of things were stacked on the table: catalogs, coupons, and a bill for the cable. A newspaper clipping was lying there too, and when the man sat at the table, it blew. And when the man picked it up from the floor, never knowing that it had flipped over, the wrong side was showing. What's this? The man wondered, so he took it a peek, and there was a shot of a pet of the week. And he thought this wife must have clipped it for that. The animal pound had a gray tabby cat. So she's cut out a cat picture. The man went. Her birthday's tomorrow. This must have been a big hint. I know she likes cats. She's been wanting a pet. She left this right here so I'd see it, I bet. He had no idea that she had really clipped the flower on the back, because the picture had flipped. And it had flipped from the service station with the flower to the picture of a cat, pet of the week. Oh, let's see what happens now. He had a few ideas for a gift for his wife: muffin tins, paperweight, a Swiss Army knife. The man was relieved now. He knew what to do. He'd get her that cat and a bowl for it too. The very next day he was off with a bound. He picked up the cat for his wife at the pound. He gave her the cat as a birthday surprise. His wife was delighted. She squealed happy cries. "Oh, honey, I love it. Oh, what a sweet cat. Just what in the world made you come up with that?" Plain tickled to death about her husband's gift choice, she talked to the cat in a baby talk voice. They named the cat Bubba, right there on the spot. And Bubba the cat liked his new home a lot. The husband grew fond of the kitty as well. He bought him a collar that had a small bell. Soon Bubba, the last-minute gift for his wife, became a big part of the family life. The couple was glad they adopted this pet, And this was a good thing, but we cannot forget that Bubba the cat might have stayed at the pound if it had not been for the clipping the husband had found. The clipping that wouldn't have been on that stack if it not for the sunflower picture on the back. A giant sunflower that couldn't have been if it had not been for a seed that was dropped by a wren. A seed from the bird-feeding lady's backyard. See the connection? It's really not hard. It's easy to see, a matter of fact, that all that happened so far can be tracked way back to one turtle and one thoughtful act. It's a cute cat, isn't it? Next door to the couple who owned Bubba now, there lived a young fellow, still single somehow. He had a pet also, a bulldog named Daisy. He was an old dog and he was terribly lazy. She'd mostly lie around drooling and snoring. Her long bulldog life had become rather boring. But Daisy found canine excitement once more when Bubba the tabby cat moved in next door. The first time she saw it outside in its yard, the bulldog went after it, chasing it hard. So Bubba with Daisy behind him went, whoosh, through the begonias and hydrangea bushes. The chase took them into the thick grove of pines, which stood on their owner's back property lines. The cat climbed a tree where a dog cannot go, so Daisy just paced in the foliage below. The treeing cat made her feel like a pup, but after a while she grew tired and gave up. The cat, safely up in the tree, wasn't budging, so out of the woods Daisy finally came trudging. She felt mighty proud of her cat-chasing feat, so like any dog she went back home to eat. The coast was now clear, so far as Bubba could tell. He came down from the tree and went back home as well. And there's Bubba and there's Daisy, and look at that cute butterfly flying. That night, Daisy's owner was watching TV, with Daisy beside him, content as can be. They sat on the couch on an old chenille throw to watch Andy Griffith, the man's favorite show. A belly-up bulldog and a man best of pals, the man rubbed her tummy and tickled her jowls. He had no idea that with each single stroke, he contacted something really bad. Poison oak. His bulldog had brought the plant's oil with her from out in those woods where it had gotten her fur. The very next day when he got out of bed, the man was all itchy. His hands were bright red. He itched all that morning. He itched all at noon. He scratched his underarms like a baboon. He stretched and scratched and he clawed. He was itching like crazy. This is so irksome, the man said to Daisy. It sounds pretty awful. It seems kind of bad. The poison oak case that this dog owner had. But sometimes a bad thing can turn out to be a very good thing in the end. You'll see. His itching got worse, and he couldn't ignore it. He went to the drugstore to get something for it. A small, friendly drugstore on Meadowbrook Drive. And that's where it happened, right there on aisle 5. Buy calamine lotion and cortisone creams, the nice, itchy man met the girl of his dreams. The girl was a pharmacist. She was so pretty, and she was not married and new to the city. She also was friendly, and to his delight, she said yes to dinner with him the next night. They went out on one date and then on another. They both laughed a lot and they clicked with each other. They went on a picnic. They went to the zoo. They went to the Christ Fair and a crawfish boil too. This couple who had met on a pharmacy aisle fell deeply in love after dating a while. The way they had met with their own special joke. It wasn't through fate, it was through poison oak. They kidded about it, and yet it was true. That terrible itch played a role for these two. Would this single guy and his girlfriend have met if they hadn't caught poison oak from his pet? And would-be Lazy Daisy have gotten in that if it hadn't been chasing the neighbor's new cat? Do you see what's happening here? The young couple married the very next May. Their wedding was held on a beautiful day, way out in the country and not far from a farm. The chapel they chose had a nostalgia and charm. They had a reception right there on the grounds of the Daisy. The bulldog was there making rounds. Their dear friends and music and good things to eat. Their big celebration was special and sweet. The ending was grand. It was late afternoon, and the bride and the groom left in a hot air balloon. The big balloon lifted and took them up high. The wedding guests cheered and looked up, waving bye. It floated away in a pace that was slow and moved through the air over the pasture below. The newlyweds thought their balloon ride was grand, but something occurred when it came time to land. The huge bright balloon coming down from the air came close to some cows, and it gave them a scare. Afraid that this thing from the sky meant them harm, they broke down the fence and ran off from the farm. It was not for two people who love led to vows. Would such a balloon have come to those poor cows? And what about those cows breaking out of their fence? It's just the next link to our chain of events. Look at the balloon and the cows running as fast as they can because they're scared. 2 miles away, that same day after dark, some young boys were camping outside in a park. Their folks were in tents back up the hill, the bluff. The boys stayed up late doing some fun outdoor stuff. They'd built a great campfire and had food to fix, hot dogs and marshmallows roasted on sticks. One boy brought a water canteen on their trip. They passed it around as they all took a sip. Above them the stars were like bright decorations. The boys used a chart and they found constellations. And it grew later, their campfire went out. They had just one flashlight. They passed it about. Each boy in its light told a story he knew. Weird, scary stories, supposedly true. The flashlight grew dim, and they all leaned in by it. The crickets stopped chirping. It got really quiet. The boys were all spooked, as it was spooked a bunch. Then all of a sudden there came a strange crunch. It came from some bushes real close to the boys. "Shh," said one camper. "Did y'all hear that noise?" They all sat stone still, then again heard the sound. Something was rustling and moving around. One younger boy whispered, "What's over there, y'all?" "A possum, I bet," said another. "That's all." They shined their weak flashlights, inspecting a bit, but they could see nothing. The rustling had quit. They waited and watched, and one said with a shiver, "Maybe a gator's crawled up from the river." Then after a while, when they had just resumed talking, they heard it again, and it sounded like walking. The boys stood up slowly, all poised to run. Something was walking, or was it someone? Still hidden by bushes, some big something crept. The footsteps got louder the closer they stepped. "It's Bigfoot," a boy cried. "He's gonna come through." To which from those bushes it answered with "Boo." It sounded real creepy It sounded too near, and one of the boys yelled, "Let's get out of here!" They all took off running, the whole frightening lot, scrambling away from this spooky camp spot. Those boys really bolted. They scrammed, they skedaddled. One dropped his canteen as he ran, scared and rattled. You just might have laughed if you'd seen these boys go, especially when you hear what they didn't know. The last eerie sound they heard as a boo was not that at all, it was a moo. That's right, the bad creature that drove them away was only a cow that wandered astray. Yes, one of those cows that the balloon had scared that day. The farmer had rounded them all up but one. This one missing cow had made those boys run. The very next morning, it all got worked out. The park ranger found the cow wandering about. The cow was returned to his owner and farm. The sweet, gentle creature had come to no harm. The boys ate their breakfast and talked of their scare. They never found out what had frightened them there. Was it really Bigfoot? It now seemed like fun. They had had an adventure, they told everyone. And as far as the one boy who had dropped the canteen, he went back to find it at 7:15. There it was, where he had dropped it, right there on the ground. The cap, on the other hand, couldn't be found. The boy didn't worry. He could get a new top. They had those back home at the sporting goods shop. The vessel itself was parked to retrieve, and knowing his parents were ready to leave, he headed back up to his prized piece of gear that stayed on all night while he dropped it in fear. The canteen got dropped, caused of one wandering cow. This matters at some point. Do you wonder how? The boy with his canteen, his parents and brothers, left the state park and waved bye to the others. While on their way home, they had one stop to make, their great uncle's house by a beautiful lake. They visit with him and their aunt, and they'd eat, and the boys were excited and in for a treat. They loved their great uncle because he was so neat. He had once been a sailor. He had told the best tales. The boy loved his sagas of long ago sails. He taught them fun names from the lands far away, Pitweem, Butterberg, Perth, and Firth of Tay. Now they'd have a story to tell him about the scary adventure they had had on camping out. They ran inside quickly upon their arrival to tell their great uncle this tale of survival. They took the canteen in to show him too. They told of the footsteps they had heard and the boo, and after describing the length of what occurred, they asked their great uncle what he thought they had heard. The droll uncle spoke with a gleam in his eye. "The wild man from Borneo," was his reply. Their aunt said, "Pshaw! Boys, of course. He's just picking. Wash up for lunch now. I've got you some fried chicken." So all of them went to the next room and ate and talked at the table, and the victuals were great. Elsewhere, away from the dining room den, back there in the room they had first visited in, something took place where it couldn't be seen. Something involving that camping canteen. The open canteen was found with no top. That had been on the ground where the boy let it drop. Had something inside of it moving about. A pretty big spider about to crawl out. In one room, folks passed by tasty stuffed eggs, while in the next room something crept with 8 legs. The spider crawled out of that capless canteen and scuttled right over a new magazine. It crept down the table, across the wood floor, and vanished clear under the hall closet door. The folks in the next room were all in the dark about what the canteen had picked up at the park. And what of this spider now in the hall closet? How did this happen? Just what had happened to cause it? This spider would probably not be around if it were not for a canteen that was left on the ground. And would that canteen have been left that way if not for a cow that had wandered astray? And would there have been a loose cow around there if not for a great balloon in the air? And would that have been not such a hot air balloon if there had been no wedding that bright afternoon? And would that nice couple who married have met if they hadn't caught poison oak from his pet? And would that man's pet dog had given him that if it had not been chasing the neighbor's new cat? And would that have saved the pound cat have been there to chase if it had not been for other events that we can trace? The sunflower photo the newspaper ran, the flower, the seed dropped, the bird-watching fan, the hummingbird, the dragonfly, the frog, the turtle, man. If that man had not saved the turtle that day, it seems things would have never have happened this way. A single good deed caused the effects that have stretched. It's easy to follow. It isn't far-fetched. A man saved a turtle, and things have progressed to where a hall closet now harbors a guest. Several days later, the aunt hosted bridge. She just pulled a red velvet cake from the fridge. The coffee smelled great. It was ready to go. She hadn't set up her good card table, though. She cleared out the place in the room where she had set it, then went to the hall closet to get it. She dreaded the closet because of its clutter. It needed cleaning. The mess made her shudder. But this time she saw something more than just a mess. A spider was in there. It caused her distress. The aunt despised spiders. She cringed at those critters. They gave her the willies, the creeps, and the jitters. It dropped in the hall when she opened the door and safely escaped through the crack in the floor. "That's it," she declared. "This hall closet needs work. This junk's just a place where the spiders can lurk." She cleaned out the closet that very next day, made piles of goodwill, and threw some stuff away. She came across things that she had forgotten she had, including a hat that was tattered and tad, a festival straw hat that was long out of style. Its pink plastic rose and bow made her smile. Turns out this great aunt was a grandmother, too, who cherished her grandkids as grandparents do. She thought of her granddaughter right off the bat and said to herself she would like this old hat. She loves playing dress-up and things such as that. She wouldn't have found this old hat where she did if it had not been for that spider her hall closet hid. If it hadn't crawled out there and from the canteen and grossed out the grandma and caused her to clean, it could have been years before this hat had been seen. The next time her granddaughter came for the day, the grandmother gave her the big hat right away. 3-year-old girl put the hat on her head. "Now let's have a tea party, Nana," she said. This sweet little girl who loved dress up and such liked having a tea party just as much. So she and her Nana had cookies and tea, and the girl wore the hat and she giggled with glee. The hat is important, as you will soon see. Back at her own house, a while after that, the little girl got out the fun fancy hat. While playing alone in her room feeling sad, she thought of the time that she and Nana had had. She put on some gloves like her grandmother taught her and found her play tea set. that Santa had brought her. She gathered it as much as her small arms were able and carried it outside and set up a table. She brought out some friends from her special affair, her floppy flamingo, her rag doll, her bear, a doll in a bathing suit, a brand spanking new, and also a cuddly and cute kangaroo. She lined them all up on the wrought iron settee beneath a magnolia, a nice shady tree. And there with that hat on, she served her guests tea. There she is serving them tea under the magnolia tree. And there's a dragonfly and a butterfly flying around. Just over the hedge, right next door to her house, there lived an old man all alone with no spouse. His good-hearted neighbor was 78. He walked with a cane and a very slow gait. And even though gardening at his age was hard, he still grew tomatoes out of his backyard. The same day the tea party happened next door, the old man went out to his garden at 4. An on and off breeze blew quite odd for July, but it was still hot and the sun was up high. He checked to see how his tomatoes were doing. A worm was on one, so the man started stewing. He stayed there and piddled too long in the sun, and this was sure something he shouldn't have done. The man got too hot, and it made him uneasy. He felt kind of dizzy and shaky and queasy. The old man passed out, and he fell to the ground, and nobody saw. There was no one around. The man needed help in a very big way, but how could help come to him where he lay? Next door in the cool, tranquil spot in the shade, the young, happy, hat-wearing hostess still played. She poured pretend tea in tiny blue cup when one of those quick and short breezes came up. It whipped the big hat from the little girl's head. "Hey, silly hat, come back here," she said. It spun around quickly and saw her hat fly and land right on top of the hedges close by. She stood on her tiptoes and reached up to the hedge and touching her hat, knocking over the hedge. The girl didn't fret. She knew just what to do. She stooped by a gap in the hedge and crawled right through. And when she emerged to the whole different side, her hat wasn't all the 3-year-old spied. There on the ground was the man from next door. She knew who he was. She had seen him before. He lay on his back between rows in the garden. She thought he was resting, and so she said, "Pardon." The man didn't answer. The girl cocked her head. "I'm getting my hat from your yard now," she said. The man didn't answer, even say hi. He lay very still, and the girl wondered why. She squatted beside him right there on the dirt and finally decided that he must be hurt. So back through the hedge to her own yard she crawled. She went to her house screen door and she called, "Come outside, Mama, the neighbor man falled." An ambulance came for the man right away. He got help in time, so he made it okay. Had gotten too hot, but he bounced back with rest, and now he's more careful, and that's for the best. The girl was a hero for what she had done, first finding the man and then telling someone. But would she have found him passed out there like that if she had not gone into his yard for her hat? And what of that hat that breeze whipped away if she hadn't have it to wear on that day? Would that sweet old man who had gotten too hot still be there today? Very possibly not. It could have been worse for that nice man next door, if not for some other things happening before. Our chain of events that we cannot ignore. And what of this old man who had a close call, for whom things worked out in the end after all? There's one thing about him that you need to know. He did something special a long time ago. He once saved a turtle, a nice thing to do, and something should sound familiar to you. It all had come full circle. Yes, he's the same man, the kind turtle saver with whom we began. The man saved the turtle because he was kind, and that's where it stopped. That was it in his mind. He had no idea when he did this good deed thing that many results that his actions would bring. And you know what happened? You followed it all, and now you can see no good deed is too small. All things are connected somehow, and it's true. The small acts of kindness, the good things you do, will all in their time find their way back to you. Wasn't that an interesting story of chain of events? And it all started with one man doing a random act of kindness. You know, if you do something kind for someone, eventually kindness comes back to you. It comes full circle. This story was so special, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you go and do something kind for somebody or save a turtle. God bless, and until we meet again, smile and be happy and have a great day.